I'm a hustler, baby.
It's time for Hustle Her Podcast. I'm your host, Deshae Keynes. Hustle Her is all about inspiring women through real life experiences that have helped to mold and develop not only me, but my guests into the entrepreneurs and leaders we are today. If you're an enterprising woman determined to succeed and looking for a bit of motivation, a bit of tough love, and some actionable takeaways to be the best you, girl, you are in the right place. Hey guys, and welcome back to Hustle Her Podcast. So excited for you to join me here today and spending some time listening to the podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the page, and you also head over to the website hustleherpodcast.com to sign up to be our VIP listener. Thank you to our sponsors, Brown & Company, as well as 59 Front. Super excited about my guest today. She is the CEO of Athora Life Re, Amy Ponnampalam. Thank you so much for joining me today.
No problem. Happy to be here.
Yes. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Yes. Nervous?
No, I'm okay. Looking forward to it. Yeah.
Okay. I think it's good. So Amy and I met at a dinner. What was it? It was Insurance Supplement Club.
Yeah.
Yes. And I remember thinking there at the table with you, we were just chatting away, and I was like, she would be awesome to have on the podcast. And so I'm so excited that you're here with me today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Yeah. All right. So let's jump right in. We're going to do a few rapid fire questions, and then we'll head into the interview.
Okay.
Ready?
Yeah.
Favorite color?
Red.
Okay. And what was your first job?
What was my first job? I think it was working in my very first job was actually being a waitress. I was a banqueting waitress in a hotel at the age of 15. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Feel like everyone's worked in a hotel at some point in their life.
Yeah.
All right. Favorite time of the year?
Autumn.
Okay. Oh man. So you're in Bermuda. We don't really get in autumn.
Well, we do. We kind of do. It's not quite the same.
Yeah. It's not quite this. Leaves don't change. It's not, that right before winter type of vibe, but I get it. It's so pretty in autumn as well. Yeah. Favorite animal?
Dog. Big dog lover.
Yeah. Do you have a dog?
I do have a dog.
What type
yes.
of dog?
He is a mix. He's a terrier mix. I adopted him from the SPCA about a year ago. So he's good fun. He's they think he's about 3.5 years old. They're not entirely sure.
Okay.
His name is Scamp.
Oh.
So yeah, he's a real character.
Oh, I love that. Okay. And what is your favorite thing to cook?
Curry. So my heritage is Sri Lankan, so we're Sri Lankan Tamil, my family, and I really enjoy Sri Lankan food, and I like spicy food. And actually, being in Bermuda, it's not that easy to come by. So the only way to get there is to cook it yourself. So yeah, I'm a big curry fan.
Okay, I love a good curry. So you're gonna have to have me over for some Sri Lankan curry one day. All right. And so, what word do you have a hard time pronouncing? Like when you think about it, you're like, oh, I don't know that word.
What word?
Oh, yeah, any word?
No, I don't think so. I feel like you're going to come across a word at some point in the next hour that I can't pronounce. Like nothing comes to mind though.
That's okay. All right. And where was your last vacation?
My last bizarrely, this is going to sound very uninteresting. My last vacation was London.
Yeah.
Which is where I'm from, and I go back there many times in the year for work. But this time, actually just over the cut match break, I went back for a holiday because I very rarely get to spend time with my friends and family in London. And London's a great city.
Love London. Yeah, London's amazing, especially London in the summertime as well.
Exactly. Yeah. The weather was pretty good. So I took a week and I just spent that time catching up with old friends, family, and enjoying the city. So
eating some good curry.
Not a very exotic holiday. I do have another holiday booked.
Okay.
Which is a yoga retreat in Southern California at the end of September.
A yoga retreat. So you're a big yogi is what they
yogi, yeah.
Like
I do,
yoga?
yeah. I really enjoy it. Yeah, fitness, mental health,
absolutely.
I find it very helpful.
Yeah. Okay. And who is your celebrity crush, or who was your celebrity crush growing up?
Okay, this is going to be really embarrassing, but I'm just going to say it. I was a huge New Kids on the Block fan.
Really?
When I was growing up. Yeah. So anyone from that era will remember the delicious Jordan Knight, one of the Knight brothers, the lead singer of New Kids on the Block. He is probably still to this day actually my celebrity crush.
Oh, yeah. All right. Amy, you learn something new every day. I wouldn't have expected, but I'm all right with it. So tell me about young Amy. Like, what did you want to be when you wanted to grow up? Like, what were you like as a kid?
I was a really outdoorsy child. So my family and I lived outside of London, so kind of in the suburbs, and we had a big garden. My dad was very into gardening, so I would generally be outdoors with him quite a lot. So we grew a lot of fruit and vegetables actually in our garden. So I spent a lot of time with him. I'd play with like the neighbor's kid as well. Would always be digging holes or building a den. And I was a really outdoorsy, active child. And then kind of academia kicks in, I guess, once you get to about 11 or 12. So then I was, I guess, quite focused on school, but a bit of an all-rounder, like very active. I like sport.
What's your favorite sport?
I mean, at school, I played netball.
Okay.
So our netball team. Yeah, I mean, I did. Yeah, I played a little bit of team sport, and then like enjoyed running. And as I got older, I guess the exercise took more the form of fitness.
Yeah,
like running and going to the gym and that sort of thing. So yeah, what else would I say about myself as a child? I was probably a bit mischievous. I think if you ask my parents, they would probably say that. I'm the youngest of two.
Okay. All girls or a mix?
Yeah, both girls. I've got an older sister who's about 2 years older than I am. So I was always the one who would push the boundaries and get into some trouble. But that's the deal if you're the younger child.
Yeah, I mean, you guys get away with murder, so I'm the oldest.
Okay,
so
there you go. Yes,
Laura's the youngest too, so you've got a companion here in the room when it comes to that. But no, oldest. I guess the youngest ones, I feel like my youngest sister was raised so much differently than I was. Like my parents were just completely different to her than they were to me. So I feel like you guys got off scot-free.
I think that's probably true, and probably got to do things earlier than my sister.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah. 100%. Yeah. Totally agree. Like I remember vividly growing up, and I was an adult I moved out by then, and I came home and my sister was just like laying on the bed. It was like 4:00, my younger sister, Dory. And it was like 4, maybe 5 o'clock in the evening. And I remember looking at her and I was like, is Dad home? And she was like, yeah, he's in his room. And I go in the room and I'm like, you saw Dory just laying down on the bed at 4 o'clock? And he was like, Deshay, what is wrong with you? Like, what? Relax. And I was like, I vividly remember growing up and I was like 16 and I was just in between extracurricular activities, just laying down the bed, just really easy. My dad came in, why are you laying down? You should have something to do, homework, something, an extracurricular activity. And I'm just like, where's this person that raised me? Like, just comfortable, just on the bed. Like, there was no fear in her eyes at all. I would have been terrified.
Yeah.
Completely different.
Yeah, I think parents maybe lower the bar a little bit once they get to number 2. So then...
That's hilarious. No, but according to her, she had it harder. So, you know, you just never know. So what did your mom and dad do?
So my dad was a chemical engineer. So he studied chemistry. He did some teaching. And then his last job before he retired from his career was he worked for the Ministry of Defence in the UK. So worked around kind of nuclear weapons and really kind of scientific guy. And then a lot of his time was also spent teaching. So he would tutor kids as well who were doing chemistry at kind of senior level. Yeah. And then my mum was an accountant. So she qualified back in Sri Lanka actually, where they were both born and raised, and then she moved to the UK to marry my dad, and then started working there. And she took a good break while she had me and my sister, but then she did go back to work after that. And so she retired. She worked well into her sort of later life.
So how would you say like your parents kind of shaped who you are as a leader today?
Gosh, lots of ways. I think I guess one of the cultures of our household was working hard. So everyone in our house worked hard. My mum, my dad, and my sister and me. There were no slackers. There was no downtime. You always pulled your weight. So I think that has definitely shaped how I lead in the types of organizations I like to work for now as well. I think the academic focus as well. So my parents, I guess you can see by their jobs, they were quite academic people. So they really encouraged my sister and I to focus at school and the importance of doing well. And I think having that strong steer in my home life probably meant that I could achieve the academic success that I got in the end. Yeah. It would have been much harder, I think, without that strong support from my parents. Yeah. And then my older sister, I think, because we were very close in age, 2 years. So everything that I was doing, she had done 2 years earlier. So I always felt like I had this bit of a mentor, I suppose, or someone who's walked that path just before me, who would, and she was very helpful. Like she would show me how things were done if I didn't really know. And so, I think a whole sort of family culture is one of kind of academia focus and sort of diligence. And that's what we all pride ourselves in.
And what does your sister do?
She's a doctor. So she's a pediatric consultant in one of the hospitals in North London. Okay.
So how did you end up in Bermuda? Because I feel like everyone, your immediate family are still in London, yes?
Yes, exactly. So for me, it was really a career choice. So I had I qualified as an actuary in the UK, so working in life insurance. and then wanted to get some overseas experience. And Bermuda is like the mothership of all actuaries.
Yeah.
So, so I ended up looking at some jobs here, and then I found one, and then decided to just move here. So have a stint abroad. And then, like a lot of people, I ended up staying probably longer than I ever thought I would. And it's now been 12 out of the last 13 years. So I moved back to London for a year, and then came back to join Athora.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. I would have not have guessed 12 years. Like, it's so crazy. Someone being in this, I've never, until that dinner, I'd never seen you before. So it's so crazy. Bermuda's so small. Like, people think you run into people all the time. And then sometimes you're like, no, you don't run into everybody there.
Exactly.
Yeah. So how did you get into insurance? Just the actuarial kind of track?
Exactly. Yeah. So I had, I feel like no one has a particularly inspiring story as to how they became an
It's
actuary,
truth.
unfortunately.
It's the
So mine is no less uninspiring. So I'd actually wanted to be a vet when I was a child. So I really loved animals, and I had geared myself up to go to a veterinary college. So in the UK, that's actually very competitive. There's only a few schools that offer veterinary science. So I'd done lots of work experience. I'd chosen subjects at a senior level, which would line me up to go to veterinary college, which is basic biology, chemistry, and then double maths. So I was all kind of geared up to go, and then it came to applying to university, and I just changed my mind. I decided that it's just not the career for me. So I changed my mind at the very last minute, and this degree called actuarial science, which I'd never heard of before, a careers advisor actually pointed it out to me and said, well, you're good at maths, you could do this. And I remember just looking at the careers guide thinking, oh, sounds fine. Tick the boxes. And then before I know it, I'm at university, did the degree, and then there's graduate programs and things that you can join. So I joined Ernst & Young actually as a trainee actuary.
Wow.
And then, it almost feels like it wasn't really a conscious choice. I just ended up working in this field, and then you start your actuarial exams. So that's another path that you find yourself on. And then I finished those. And then, before you know it, you've built a career.
Yeah.
And then off you go. So it wasn't entirely conscious. Yeah.
I feel you're absolutely right. I don't think anyone I think it's a little different now with like kids going away to school. It's like, okay, cool, I want to come back and work in insurance. But previous to this, it was just anyone you talk to is like, did anyone want to be in insurance? We kind of just like fell into it. So it's so crazy how everyone kind of has that similar story of insurance kind of happened to me.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And particularly falling into life insurance as well, because you'll know from being in Bermuda, there's a huge difference between life insurance and the P&C world. And that wasn't a conscious choice. I remember the graduate program application form for Ernst & Young, and you don't tick a box to say where you want to end up. You just fill in a form to say, I want to be an actuary. And then they allocate you into a team.
Okay.
And I guess that whoever made that decision for me shaped the rest of my career, because I was in the life insurance team, and then here I am.
Thank you to whoever that was. Amy, thanks you.
Yeah, I can't complain.
There you go. So, so you came back to Bermuda to join Athora. So what were you doing before that?
So I'd moved to Bermuda in 2010, originally, joined another reinsurance company here, Hanover Life Re. So I was working with them as the corporate actuary and the chief risk officer. And that was actually my first foray into reinsurance. Up until then, I'd always worked in insurance and consulting. So I worked with them for about 7 years, and then decided to move back to the UK, kind of to broaden my career out a little bit, actually. So away from the traditional actuarial space. And I took a job with Legal & General in London, working in corporate strategy, which was, therefore looking at things that were well beyond the actuarial sphere, which I really enjoyed. But like buses, these things always come along at once. The Athora opportunity came up very shortly afterwards. And I just thought this is a great step for me. And the plans that Athora had were really exciting. They were very new, great people involved. So I decided to then move back to Bermuda and take my current job with Athora.
That's amazing. So as a CEO of Athora, like how many people report into you?
So we have a reinsurance business unit, which is spread across, we've got people in Bermuda, Ireland, Italy, London, one person's in Portugal. So we're heavily networked. We've got about 35 people now overall within our reinsurance business unit. And all of that work then consolidates into the top company that sits in Bermuda.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in the life space or in insurance in general, do you kind of feel like it's very male dominated?
I think it varies a lot depending on which sides of the business you look at. So maybe sort of transactions side versus the more kind of corporate functions. I've noticed, just again in my time in Bermuda, it varies to some extent between life and non-life. It can vary between Europe and North America.
Yeah.
So I almost don't want to make a generic statement.
No, I get it. Yeah.
So and my own experience has equally varied depending on which side of the business I've been on or which country I've been operating in. There's some quite big differences, I'd say.
And so with like leading this group of people and like kind of pushing the mandate forward of the company that you work for, what have been some of the kind of, I wouldn't say challenges, but I guess challenges is a good word, you know, as not necessarily just a woman, just as a leader, period, that you've kind of seen?
I think one of the biggest challenges and probably one of the greatest things I've learned in the job that I've had is about how different people are, how unique every individual is. And, you know, an organization can have an overarching culture and a set of behaviors and values, but the individuals who work within a team are, you know, it sounds like an obvious thing to say, but they are individual people. Their motivations are different to the next person. And how the things that they respond positively to or negatively to will differ from person to person. So I think as a leader, I found it's sometimes challenging to really learn a person and understand what their drivers are. But I think it's really important to do that.
Yeah,
because one size just doesn't ever fit all.
Yeah. I tell people all the time, like the people side of management is actually the harder side than the actual business. Like, do you find like, I've got the actuary stuff down. It's the people side that takes the work. Yeah,
exactly. And I guess my job and any job, I guess, as a CEO is to bring together the right people to perform to their best, because that's how the company then achieves its goals.
Yeah.
So it's all about the people, actually.
Yeah. No, it's so true. It's so refreshing to hear a leader say that, because a lot of times we're so driven by the numbers and making the company money that we forget that there are people behind, you know, the numbers and the driving of the money as well. So hearing leaders say that, I think, is so important, because I think it's becoming more common now. But previously to that, we weren't as focused on the people side of it. Do you think, or have you experienced something different in your career?
I think we're maybe learning that more as time goes on. And I see a lot of articles about the sort of changing role of the CEO. And this has always differed depending on which company you look at. The role of the CEO can look completely different in one company to another company. But I increasingly see kind of narrative and articles written about the CEO role being more one of service. Actually, this is a phrase that really resonates with me. It's a position of service and not a position of power. And what that really means is that you are there to serve the people who are going to drive this business forward. So create teams, create work environments, create structures, create objectives, create alignment, motivation, all of those things that these people need to be able to do their best work. And I feel like that's maybe a newer concept of leadership, quite different to maybe a more traditional CEO role you'd have seen maybe 20 or 30 years ago, where it was probably more about power and hierarchy.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So as a leader, like, do you kind of look back at anyone who was your manager and you kind of mimic that, or the opposite, and you're like, you know what, I had a bad manager and I do the complete opposite? Do you kind of think like that when you're leading?
I do, yeah. I mean, there are definitely leaders I've had in the past where I kind of cobble together things that they've done, and you know, everyone does some things well and some things less well. So I guess I try and take the best of what I've seen from the people who've led me. I guess some of the sort of really strong traits that stick in my mind are setting a standard of excellence. I guess another challenge I found when I took a role of leadership is that you can't do everything yourself. So your only hope is that your team perform to the standard that you need them to. And a lot of that is about setting a culture of performance, high performance. And I learned that from people I've worked with before. Like, how do you set that culture of high performance? And in some ways, my mum was one of the greatest leaders at this. She set this culture of high performance for our whole family.
Right. I like that. I like that. Looking at it, like, my mom set the standard for the whole family.
Yeah.
I've never heard that before, but I genuinely like that, because when you think about it, your family kind of runs like a business in some senses, right? And so if you pull from that, and you use your mom as an example of that, and it's a successful family, then that works well too, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So I mean, she wasn't on us to do our homework and like that. It wasn't like that. It was more that there was just a culture in our family which was you were expected to do well, almost without it being said. And I think that's exactly what I try and achieve now in an organization, which is it's about creating a culture of performance. So you don't have to be pushing every single person to get something done.
Yeah.
It's just the way things work around here.
Yeah. And so, I mean, with that though, you still get people who you do have to kind of give extras to, like in your role, like obviously you have to find different things, like you said, that make people tick, that, you know, drive people in different ways. When someone isn't performing well, like how do you deal with that?
I think like trying to understand what is the blocker. Is it something within them? Is it something in their environment? And this is where the sort of uniqueness of each person becomes really important to understand. And then, you know, is there a lever that you can pull to help that person do better in their jobs? I think it's a really complex science. People, you can take a person and put them in one environment, and they'll just flourish, and then you can put them in a different environment, and they will just crumble.
Yeah.
And they're literally the same person with the same skill set. So you have to really work hard to think, what is it about their environment that's making them either do well or not do so well?
And that's been successful, you find, in those environments, like figuring out like the why behind someone isn't performing well.
Exactly. And I think this is where then organizational culture becomes quite important, because maybe there are some organizations that have a culture that just doesn't work for some people. It's important that everyone accepts that, and it's okay. It's why it's really important to choose an organization that fits you and your chosen way of working.
Yeah, definitely. I know we talk about this at work all the time, and it's people say, oh, this person doesn't fit our culture. And I always correct people, because I'm like, no, it's up to the organization to welcome people and adjust the culture to fit that particular person. Like, yes, as an employee, I come in, I want to make sure that it's somewhere that I want to be. But as a business, we have to shift to welcome everyone that we're essentially hiring into our door. So it's always a challenge a bit, because I feel like people get very comfortable with the teams that they have, and they want a lot of like-minded people, and not realizing that diversity kind of creates better teams. You know what I mean? Not everyone always sees that. But I guess as a female CEO, and I want to keep emphasizing that because obviously Hustle Her podcast, but you are a leader regardless. Yeah. Has there been any challenges with leading men? Like, do you ever find difficulty with that, or even women? Is there any difficulties with, you know, the different sexes in your environment?
I think, no, I'll be really introspective on this point. I think the biggest challenge in some ways is myself. And this, again, I guess goes back in a way to how my generation of women were raised, which is there was a lot, and there probably still is today, a lot of gender conditioning. And with myself and my sister, you know, we were raised in a certain way, the way that little girls were raised 40 years ago, which is to be nice and be polite and not be disruptive, and you know, feel good when you make other people happy and not cause any trouble, and be diligent, and, you know, always try and do your best, and not offending people, not having a contrarian view. So, no, I could go on, but I'm stereotyping a bit here, but there was a lot of that sort of gender conditioning that went on with us when we were kids, and we carry that through into our adult lives. And then when you then find yourself in an organization where you're dealing with men and women and, you know, all kinds of people, sometimes that mindset can be your own worst enemy, because you hold yourself back. And I think that can sometimes happen when women interact with men, probably vice versa as well, that you anchor back to some of those learnings you had when you were a child about what is a good engagement model for a girl and a boy. And then you bring that into the workplace, and it's not helpful, actually.
No, I think you're absolutely right. We sometimes, you know, revert back to how we were raised, because that worked for so long for so many people. And I guess, you know, when I think about women in leadership or entrepreneurs or things like that, I wonder what like our grandparents or great grandparents would think about, you know, women in leadership now, like how different like the household looks, you know, two working parents or two people who are married but don't have kids, or, you know, single women who are thriving in life without being married or having kids, like I wonder what they think about, you know, or what they would think about of that lifestyle that we all kind of live now. It's very different to how we were all raised. I know my grandmother still asks me all the time when I'm having a kid, so it hasn't gone very far.
Exactly. I mean, it's difficult to lose those mindsets.
Yeah.
But over time, I think they change. And I know I've got two nieces who are 8 and 10 now. I can already see they challenge the world in a way that we never did. But it's more importantly, we make it okay for them to do that. So I guess over time, this is how kids will be raised, and we'll start to lose that gender conditioning that we bring into the workplace, which is really unhelpful. Yeah,
definitely. So you mentioned before about you being introspective and how you were raised. Like, how do you, when you're thinking of something and you're dealing with it as a leader, you know, making decisions for the business, how do you come out of that mindset of how you were raised?
I think a lot of it is trying to be aware, just having the self-awareness. So if I find myself in a situation which I'm not comfortable in, or there's a problem and I can't solve it, then I do try and check myself and think, how am I behaving here? What's troubling me?
Yeah.
And is it a real problem, or is it just a mindset problem?
Yeah.
Is there a way to reframe this such that maybe it's not actually a problem at all?
Yeah.
And a lot of it comes down to actually how you feel. And you know, one of the sort of classic gender conditioning issues that females have is wanting to please and feeling upset about yourself if you've displeased somebody.
Yeah.
And learning to identify that feeling and be okay with it. And sometimes looking at men can be quite helpful.
Yeah.
You know, I think a lot of women use that whole, you know, what would a guy do thing. I think it's actually helpful to think about that. Would the guy sitting next to me feel this way if he said what I said?
The answer is usually no.
Yeah. So there's a lot to learn, and there's a lot to learn, I think, from that, if we're going to try and sort of close this gender gap.
Yeah, I think so. I totally agree with you. I think a lot of times we as women, we overthink scenarios to your point that men just would say it or just do it without even thinking about it. You have the classic, you know, when a woman applies for a job, like she has to have like every line item on the job description. She has to, you know, essentially be qualified to do that before she applies. Where with a man, he could see 2 or 3 things on there that he can do. And he's like, yeah, I could do that job and I'm going to apply for it. It's like, how do we change that conditioning when it comes to women to just kind of go for things? Because we can do it as well. I wonder, how do we shift that?
Yeah, I think I think self-awareness is part of it. I think organizations can also be helpful here. It's supporting women in catching themselves out if they're doing something that really isn't, you know, it's just playing into a gender role. I mean, I think another kind of classic issue that befalls a lot of women is picking up what, you know, the sort of domestic work of the office or a meeting, or you know, being the person who coordinates and corrals everyone together and you know, sets up the next meeting. And before you know it, you've done a whole pile of stuff that no one else stepped up to do this. So why did you? So, and I think organizations and leaders can do a lot to deliberately call that out and support women. If you see a woman stepping into that role, just maybe say, look, you don't need to do that. And if you're actually a leader, you could say, well, actually, I think I'm going to assign this job to somebody else. It doesn't have to be a guy. It just has to be someone that isn't the person who just stepped into it because she identifies that as being her job.
Yeah, I think it's so important. I think that's where our leadership comes in heavy with that. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times, some leaders, not everyone, can just allows people to kind of just do what they just want to do or not naturally good at sometimes, not realizing it takes away from what they're actually being hired to do. So, you know, yeah, okay, cool. Could you get that glass of water for the person sitting next to you? Yeah, you could, but should you? Or is that something that you need to do, or is it someone else's job? And just thinking about it, because you're absolutely right. Sometimes we'll organize something just because, I don't even think because I'm a woman, just because I could do it. You know what I mean? And I don't think men think that way. You know, it's like, oh, someone else would do it. And it's so interesting that we are just innately like that without thinking anything else.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think, you know, we're making a lot of generalizations here.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think spotting when that does happen, because gender conditioning is quite a prevalent thing. So spotting it when it is happening and then making a switch in how the organization's working so that you can save the person from themselves in a way. I think that's really important.
Yeah. So having, like, you know, this really huge job running a company, like, how has that affected your personal life, or does it at all?
It does. I mean, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time and energy, actually, I think is probably the bigger part. It's the energy that it consumes. So yeah, depending on how things are going at work, sometimes work gives you energy, and that, I guess, reflects in my personal life when I feel good and I can do lots of things in my spare time. But then there are times when it's very demanding and it drains my energy, and creating a bit of time to replenish the battery store in a way before heading back into the office, that has become very important.
Yeah.
I think as I've gotten older, I've become more aware of health, the importance of preserving and maintaining your health. I think we all know that stressful corporate jobs are bad for your long-term health. At least they're bad if you don't manage them very carefully. And now I'm in my 40s, and it's that age where your body doesn't recover from things if you let them
as
go
quickly
wrong.
as it used to.
Yeah, exactly. And if at all.
Yeah.
So I'm more mindful of that, of my own health, and like recognizing when work is becoming a health problem, whether then that's about taking a bit of time off, or if I'm not getting enough sleep, which then impacts diet and your ability to exercise. You know, I try and spot these things now probably more than I would have done in the past.
Yeah.
And try and make a correction.
Yeah, no, I think I totally agree with you. We did something the other day. I can't remember what it was, on like a Friday evening. Oh, it's my job summer party. We did something on the job summer party on the Friday, and then I had a friend of mine's birthday dinner that night.
Right.
And then like the Saturday afternoon, she had a boat. And on Sunday, I was like, why do I feel like I've been hit by a truck?
Right.
And I'm like, just doing like 3 things in a row like that, I just can't do it anymore. Like I got to pick one, and that's it. I need a day to recover. You know what I mean? And it wasn't even like a heavy, you know, drinking thing or anything like that. It was just like draining in terms of the amount of stuff that we had to do, just being on the water. And I think like even 5 years ago, I would have done that without even blinking. Right. And like now, Monday morning, I was just so sluggish. Yeah. And it's just like, wow, you know, you just don't even take into account how much your body changes as a woman in particular as you get older. And I mean, I don't have any kids or anything like that, or married or anything. So I couldn't imagine, you know, having that on top of, you know, a pretty heavy, stressful weekend as well. It's just incredibly insane.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's
crazy times that we all live in. But
yeah. Making time to rest and to get your energy back, and you know, I guess, and also sort of reconnect with yourself as well. I think with many jobs you can get lost in who you are and your work identity, and then sort of lose sight of who you really are.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, obviously, you know, you've made it to very successful in your career currently, but how did you kind of market yourself in that way to where when the Athora opportunity came up, you know, you were, you know, tapped on the shoulder for that? Like, how would you say you marketed yourself throughout your career?
So this is probably not really what you want to hear, but I didn't really. I don't think I did market myself. It was again a bit of a unconscious thing that just happened. However, on reflection, I can see how I probably did market myself. I just didn't realize it.
Got you.
So to get me into the roles that I have found myself in, I think that sort of diligence has been a big part of it, in that every role I've had, I've delivered well. And I think that is quite attractive to the job market.
Absolutely.
Someone who can really create a change and leave a legacy. I think that has probably been part of my brand, I guess, and that's probably what my employers have bought into. I think the thing with life insurance is it's a very technical area of work, and therefore even when you're in a position of leadership, it can be very helpful if you do have a technical understanding of what the heck's going on. Yeah, you don't have to, but it's certainly helpful. And I think my technical training as an actuary has then lent itself very well to me becoming probably a more effective leader of a life insurance company.
Got it.
Because I can understand everything that's happening within the business. Now that can be a double-edged sword, if I'm honest, because I think, you know, you can sometimes fall back to what you know, which is your technical skill set. Yeah. And I have to sometimes remind myself that's not my job anymore. And there are other perfectly competent people in our organization to do that, and it doesn't need to be me. But I've certainly had this feedback from my own team, which is that they appreciate the technical insight I can bring, just given that I've got a technical background.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
So I think that's probably also been part of my brand, I guess.
Yeah, I know you mentioned it just now as well about like your brand, and you said just doing really well at your job, but like I feel like that started just from your mom as the CEO of your family, just instilling that in you, right? And just doing well. And sometimes you don't need to do anything a little bit extra. Sometimes you do. You know, being good at your job and excelling at that is your brand as well, right? I think people don't give a lot of credit to that.
Right.
Yeah.
I heard someone recently phrase it as me being quite an action-oriented leader, which is true. Like I lead through action. Now, this is something that I would personally also like to work on more, in that there are also leaders who don't lead through action. They lead more through kind of winning hearts and minds. And I think when you're in very large organizations, kind of really trying to leverage scale, the winning hearts and minds part is more important than the action-oriented leadership. And that's probably something I would like to do at the next stage of my career, really learn a bit more about how to do that.
Yeah, I think, but it's knowing the right type of leader that you need to be for your organization at that particular time, right? And depending on where your organization is, like being an action leader is what it may need right now, you know? And I think a good leader adapts for whatever their organization needs at the time. And maybe that's just what your organization needs at the moment for it to continue to be successful.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think we all have it in us to do that by hearts and minds. But I feel like you do that too, based on what you said about each person being, you know, different and trying to pull differences out of different people, especially if they're not doing well. So I think it's a bit of both.
Yeah. No, that's and it's a great point you make there. It does depend on where your organization is at. You're right. I mean, I joined Athora. We were a startup organization, so there is no shortage of action needed.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know, part of our corporate identity was roll your sleeves up and get stuck in. So that I guess that's what I've done for nearly 6 years now. But as we've grown and we're becoming bigger, that we need less of that, because there's other people who can do that, and then we need more of the sort of leading at scale type of people. So
for sure.
So
if you could go back to 18-year-old Amy and say, out of everything you know now, like what would you tell her?
Oh my goodness, what would I tell my 18-year-old self? So I don't know what the words would be, but I'd somehow try and find a way to cut the imposter syndrome at the source.
I feel that.
I think that probably started at that age where you're going out into the big wide world and you start questioning, should I be here? Do I deserve to be here? Is everyone else just better than me and I'm somehow here by chance or by luck? And I certainly had that from going university age really onwards.
Really?
I think going back to say to that younger version of myself, just forget about the imposter syndrome. You know, you're here because you deserve to be here. And the minute you don't deserve to be here, you'll be out. Don't forget that either.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know, make the most of it. I think that's probably what I would.
How did you deal with imposter syndrome?
Again, I guess awareness is the thing. Like I can put a word to it now. When I was 18, I definitely couldn't.
I don't even think we knew what imposter syndrome was when we were younger, right?
Yeah, it was just a sort of a very uncomfortable feeling. So being able to put a word to it is helpful, because then you can actually talk about it with people. I think that's it, to be honest. I think it was always present. I don't know if that's a female thing. I know guys who suffer the same, but there was an element of learning to live with it. I think, to be honest, I think as the awareness of it has grown and more of my friends, we talk about it more now in my friend circles. Yeah. And knowing you're not by yourself, other people feel the same way, that all of that helps. Yeah. It just creates a bit of a support.
Yeah. I think the support, like what you said, is super key. Being able to talk to your friends about it. Like, you know, I have a group of friends, like if I'm feeling a type of way, I'm just like, am I missing something here? Like, nope, you can do it. You know what I mean? That support is key.
It is key. Yeah.
Having the people in your corner, and also friends that are in industry as well, so they also get it. Like, it's nothing worse than having a hard day or something going on and trying to have to explain it to someone, and you're just like, okay, it's taking the sting out of it because I've got to explain to you what happened. So it's always nice to, you know, talk to people who get it, right? So it's always really good.
And then their eyes glaze over because whatever work situation, it sounds incredibly dull to them.
I know. But dating too, like dating someone and trying to explain to them what's happening at work, I'm like, okay, I'm done. I can't explain to you the characters in the story and then tell you what's wrong. It becomes like a whole different thing, but it is what it is.
Yeah, but it is important to be able to offload, I think, to someone when
when
these things are happening. Yeah.
I do this at work now as well, and I can't remember where I got it from, but when someone's offloading to me, I immediately ask, I said, do you want feedback or you were just venting? Like, I need to know the difference.
Okay.
Because I go into action mode, right? Of how can we solve this, right? And so for me, it saved a lot of, personally, arguments. And then professionally, people just wanting to offload just to get it, you know, off of them, as opposed to just wanting like actionable feedback and takeaways so they can do it. But every time I think about that, I share with everybody. I'm just like, do you want feedback or are you just venting to me right now? Because I feel like it allows people to free up and you don't feel as obligated to have to give back, you know, what they should do in that particular scenario.
It's a great question to ask, because they will then generally get what they want rather than what you think they want.
Exactly. And sometimes people, I wish more people would ask me, because I actually don't want your feedback. I just want you to listen to me complain about whatever it is for 2 seconds, and then I kind of feel better after that.
Yeah. No, we all need a bit of that.
Yeah, for sure. So what would you say is something that people kind of misunderstand about you? And like when you hear it about yourself, you're like, that's not me at all.
So sometimes I think my action orientation can be perceived as being almost too action oriented, too driven, which is something I really, it's taken me some time to understand why this is a problem.
Yeah.
Maybe this also goes back to my family culture and how we were built, which is, you know, the harder you work, the better. Like there's no end to how hard you could work and therefore how much you could achieve. Now I recognize in the workplace, sometimes driving too hard can be uncomfortable for some people because not everyone is at the same gear. I think I've also become aware of the difference between, well, I guess by definition, leadership is a person that people want to follow. And following someone is very different to pushing them. Like one is you're in front and the other one is you're behind. And pushing from behind can be quite an uncomfortable dynamic for people. Leading from the front, however, is generally a motivating place for other people than to be. So understanding that difference has been important for me. And I think also recognizing how sometimes my action orientation can feel like I'm pushing from behind, which is just annoying actually sometimes. So trying to reposition that trait that I have into one that works better from a point of leadership than just sort of pushing people along is, that's, I feel like it's a misconception, but it's also something I need to try and change about how I operate.
Do you kind of, I wouldn't say regret, but do you think that you would have seen more of a balance kind of growing up from that environment, that culture? Like, yes, push, achieve, but also the other side of it as well, where it's a bit more relaxing, a bit more, not necessarily relaxing, but a bit more comforting not necessarily in the family unit, but it's okay to not fail, but be a bit more comfortable in certain scenarios. Do you think that would have helped with it, or do you appreciate that kind of foundation?
I think the question is, if I had more of that in my family culture, would I then identify with it more? And I think the answer would be yes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. But that we don't really have that element in our family, as I say. So yeah, I think having the experiences of that earlier on in my life probably would have made me more aware of what that means. Yeah.
Do you think that that's cultural? Like, from your parents being from Sri Lanka, like, do you think that's more of a cultural thing? Or was it just your family unit?
I think it's just my family. There's probably an element of culture to it as well. But I think, you know, both of my parents are one of 10 children. So we have huge families.
So you have huge families.
We have huge families. And my mum was the second oldest in her family. And it's so interesting talking to her siblings, who we're all very close to, but she was always this person who would drive things forward, like really push and achieve and push and achieve. And that was who she was. So definitely wasn't part of their family culture. It was just her. Yeah. So I think it's more a personality trait, to be honest.
But see that older siblings, you push, right? Yeah. Like you become like the driving force behind your siblings. So that actually makes a lot more sense now. But 10 on either side is a lot. Yeah. So are you aiming for 10 kids as
Definitely
well?
Not, no. I have a sum total of 0 at the moment. Yeah, just the dog.
Yeah, just the dog. Same here. I know. My dog lives with my mom now though, so It's unfortunate, but it's okay.
I wouldn't rule out 10 dogs at some point in the future, though.
10 dogs, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Any kids would you want or no?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah. I love the fact that you said that. And not because, there's anything wrong with it or with it, but I feel like women sometimes are very afraid to say that because back to what you said earlier, we're conditioned to want to get married and have children and if you're not, you're almost not as accomplished as people who are. So I'm very pleasantly surprised, but happy that you said no, because it's okay, right? Like it's okay to be fulfilled with your 10 dogs.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly, right?
Yeah, and I think this is a changing condition now that it's becoming more okay. I mean, you know, it's just have to say I don't want children. I decided to not have children, and I had just again almost by chance. If I look at my immediate friend circle, very few of them actually have children. So in my world, I'm not even in the minority. There's a number of women who felt similarly to the way I felt. Yeah. And I think that'll become more and more common as well as time goes on.
I agree with you. It's weird though, because in my friend circle, it was like that, but now it's slowly changing. Like people are either getting married or divorcing. And some of them are having kids now. So I'm in like this weird place where it's like, some of us aren't, and then some of us are, but all really high functioning, high performing women. But it's so strange because I'm in a very similar, like, do I want to or do I not kind of phase in life. So that's why I said I like that you said that, because it very rarely do you hear it. Very, very rarely. Yeah. Yeah.
I will probably hear it more.
Yeah, I think so. I think it'll come up. How does your family feel about that?
I mean, I don't know. I should probably ask them. I think it's evolved over time. I mean, I'm also now at a later age where they would know that having children wouldn't be that straightforward for me. So I'm sure in my younger years it would have been something they would have hoped for me, and I would have done too. I mean, I also had that vision. When I was 22, I assumed I would at some point have a family and kids and just do all the things that my mum did. So over time, I think the expectation that I've had of myself and that they've had of me has just changed. I mean, I never thought my life would take me to where I am today. Yeah. And so the idea of having children has also moved around and sort of shuffled around with that. And it's the same with, a relationship. Obviously you want a relationship ideally if you're going to have a child. Yeah. You don't have to have one, but I think again, that's generally your expectation when you're younger. So if that doesn't work out, then maybe children never really happen for you. And then my family's always, I guess, just been an observer as to how my life has played out, and
which is good.
Yeah, exactly. And then accepted it as we are.
And you're fulfilled and you love life and you don't feel like you're lacking, because I feel like people think when women don't have children or are not married, they're lacking in some way, and you don't seem like you feel that way at all.
No, I don't feel like I'm lacking, but I do feel this. I'm not sure if it's linked to not having kids. I do feel this sort of sense of pressure to do something really impactful for the earth before I leave. Now, I don't know if when you have children, you feel like, well, they're impactful for the earth and they'll be here when I leave. So that's, I've done my thing. And therefore, if you don't have kids, that's why I feel this. But certainly as I get now into my 40s, I really think, I've spent a lot of my time on myself, building up my career and working hard and looking after myself. And now I look at the sort of wider world and think, well, what am I doing really for the wider world? What will be the thing that I do that makes an impact here? Yeah. So I definitely feel a sense of urgency almost to figure out what that is.
Figure out what that looks like. I mean, the world is forever changing. Yeah. Goodness gracious. Every day we look at something else happening that we're like, how is that even happening? We thought the pandemic was the end, but apparently it's not. Yeah. So it's crazy. But yeah, figuring that out, I think, is really good. So when you think of like your best time to work, like what would you consider like your zone of genius? Like, are you a morning person? Do you get things better done in the afternoon? What's your like zone of genius? This is Amy's time to just knock out work.
Probably evening time, I think. If I want to focus and get something done, I think that's probably when I'm most productive. I'm definitely a person who is affected by all the interference that we get day to day from emails and texts and all this kind of stuff. And I always find I travel back to the UK quite a lot, and then so the flight back from London to Bermuda it's an afternoon flight, 6-7 hours. I never connect to the Wi-Fi, but I work the whole way home with no Wi-Fi connection, because there's always sort of 3 or 4 things that need that deep focus time. And I use that time to get those things done. And I inevitably then ends at 6 hours, just think, like, this is amazing. Why don't I do this more? I should just switch off my Wi-Fi in my house.
And just knock out work.
And just knock out work. And you get, I don't get into that sort of flow mindset very frequently during my day. My typical day is just a series of meetings and calls, a range of topics, in between trying to stay on top of emails, talking to people, constantly talking to people, actually. It's just constantly talking to people. So that mindset where you're just silent and it's just you and the job you're trying to do, I don't have a lot of that. So, you know, I value that time, and I do often think I should just really, really recreate this more at home.
Yeah, it's difficult though. That Wi-Fi switch that's hard to take it off.
It is, exactly, yeah.
So you got to take advantage of that time. What would you kind of say is your proudest moment so far as a leader? Like, what are you like the most proud of that you've accomplished?
So I share this with my own boss at work. I talk about these moments of magic, and you know, I think working with an organization like Athora, probably any large organization, there's a lot of kind of chaos and mess and challenge and strife that goes on. And then every now and then you get what I call these moments of magic, where I watch the people in the room interact with each other and sort of generate and create and build and then deliver something. And I just think, my goodness, like, this is what it's all about. Yeah. You know, as I say, this kind of CEO role is like one of service. It's, you kind of want to create the climate where that can happen. And then when you see that happening, that's really satisfying. And that's how I feel like, oh, it's working.
Yeah, absolutely. That the light bulb moment. Oh wow, all this hard work, it's finally paying off.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's about the dynamics between people. You know, they're maybe bouncing ideas of each other, or challenging each other, or kind of iterating an idea to get to a solution. And it's something that's really good for the business. And you think, yeah, these are great people, and they're doing their best work in this moment together. Yeah. That's really special.
No, I love that. So I guess, Amy, just kind of wrapping up here, like, when you think of all the things that you've accomplished, and moving to Bermuda, leaving Bermuda, coming back as a CEO, like, when you're no longer on the planet and you've accomplished your great thing to give back to the planet, and you have your dogs, what do you want to be remembered for? When someone says Amy, and, you know, they look at your life, like, what would you want them to say about you?
I think I'd like to be remembered for helping people, and maybe it's on an individual level. At least it has been so far. When I talk about, you know, the feeling, the sense of urgency to do something big for the world before I leave, maybe that's helping people at scale. But if that never happens, I think I would at least like to be remembered for helping individuals who I've come across in my life over time, who remember me for something I did for them. And this happens now, and it's very warming when I get this feedback. An individual will reach out from years ago, or, you know, it happened recently. I bumped into a guy in the BA lounge in London, and it was a guy who was a trainee actuary years ago, really about 20 years ago. And I had interviewed him for the graduate program. And anyway, he sent me this message afterwards on LinkedIn saying, I just really appreciated that you gave me that chance.
That's amazing.
And I think that is a really satisfying thing to have in my life. So, and I come across individuals all the time who I think, this is a great person, they deserve great things. I want to try and help them get it.
That's good. I love that. Well, thank you so much for spending some time
with
that.
For having
that
me.
45, more than that now, went by really quickly,
it did,
right?
Yeah,
So
great conversation.
There you go. It went really well. Well, guys, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. And thank you again to Amy for sitting on the couch and telling us her amazing story. Again, big shout out to our sponsors for this season, Brown & Co., as well as 59 Front. As always, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you head over to the website to sign up to be a VIP listener. And if you want to learn any more about Amy, she can be found on LinkedIn. If you have any questions, make sure you head over there and check her out to find out more about her. Once again, thank you for watching Hustle Her Podcast.